What's shakin' bacon? Welcome to the Bartender and the Butcher. Today we'll be taking a whole beef rib and turning it into a variety of cuts. Steaks, a roast, some ribs. This specific piece of meat is called a subprimal. It's what your grocery store meat departments are getting in, the ones that cut in store still. Anyway, I love buying these when they're on sale for multiple reasons. It saves us a ton of money. I can also control the size and how lean or fatty each portion is. Plus, it's really fun to do. So let's get this thing started. A beef rib is located in the upper middle area of the cow. A whole one will have 7 bones, and as you can see, it kind of tapers in size, rounder on one end, and then it's a little flatter and wider on the other end. 2 very distinct sides, the leaner side and the fattier side, also known as the chuck end and the smaller end. Why this is called the smaller end when it's bigger, I have no idea. The leaner end butts up to where a leaner strip steak would be, whereas the fattier end butts up to the chuck, which is a well-used muscle in the cow. For roasts, I personally prefer the fattier side, but it's a choose your own adventure when you have this kind of ability to cut it up yourself. Flip it over, and because we are at home, we won't be able to split any of the bones. You would need a bandsaw to do that, so thick bone-in steaks are all you're going to get. If you want thinner steaks, they're going to have to be boneless. We have a family dinner coming up, and there'll be 8 of us. My general rule of thumb with roasts is 1 bone per every 2 people. Now, a 4-bone roast will be more than enough for 8 people, but I also like to have leftovers. I'm going to portion out the section that I'm going to be using for a roast and then put the portion that's going to become steaks back in the fridge because we are working with something perishable that needs to stay cold. I would say you've got 30 minutes to an hour outside of the fridge. If it goes over that, take a break, put it back in the fridge, let it cool back down, take it back out and finish. So I'm going to 1, 2, 3, 4, cut right here directly in between these 2 bones. You'll also see the bones back here. So make sure you're cutting a straight line. Put this to the side, this piece that'll become the steaks, and stick that in the fridge. Here is our roast. You can cook it directly like this. I'm going to do something called boning and tying, which just means I'm going to cut the bones off and then tie them back onto the bottom. Start with a straight cut, angle your knife towards the bones for maximum meat preservation. You want to do shallow cuts, angling your knife while pulling the meat and the bone apart at the same time. Towards the bottom, you're going to hit where the bone starts to jut out this way. When you get there, start angling your knife towards the meat because that's the way the bone is going. Still shallow cuts, still pulling the meat apart to fully separate it. Once you get down to the point where the bone and the meat are just kind of hanging off, you want to flip it around to where you can hold the bones up, and then you just want to cut along here. I would definitely recommend having the bones face you when you do this because it makes it easier. Now you've got your beef back ribs and a boneless beef rib roast. The reason I like to take the bones off of the roast and then tie them back on is really for the ease of serving. So yes, the bones will protect the roast from drying out and it'll provide some stability so you don't have to use a rack. This also makes it so you just have to cut the strings off and slice your roast. You don't have to worry about boning it out when it's hot, when you've been cooking all day and when people are ready to eat. I'm not going to trim this tail up any because I like the roast to be fattier, but if you want it, you just take your knife and just follow this piece of fat down. Now I'm going to show you how to tie the bones back onto the roast. Turn your roast over, and then you just line up your bones exactly the way they were when they were still attached. And then we take some twine, and I put the open end closest to me, jimmy it under there, bring this side forward to meet up, put my 2 fingers underneath, take the open string, loop it around my fingers, cross it over, and then through the loop that I've created. And then you just tighten it up as much as you can. Once it's as tight as you want it, make another knot and do that as many times as you need down the roast just for it to hold together. I like to do 1 tie every inch and a half because it looks pretty, but you could probably get away with just doing 2 to 3 ties. You don't need a bunch of string on your roast. You just need enough for it to hold together until you're ready to cut them off and slice it up for dinner. There's definitely more than one way to tie a roast, so choose whatever way you find easiest. Fix your strings so they don't look janky, or keep them janky, whatever floats your boat. And there you have a bone and tied rib roast. Into the fridge this goes. Moving on to our other half. So like I said before, my plan with this side is to get one big boy bone-in ribeye out of it and then cut the rest into boneless. We'll cut the bone in first. I'm gonna do it off of the end. As you can see, the end of this is not flat. Some will be flatter than others. I am going to actually flatten this out. So to do that, come over here, make sure we're clearing the bone and try to get this as straight as this is. And we're just going to slice it. With the end that you cut off, you can do a lot with this. Chunks for stew or strips for stir fry, but don't throw it away. Do not throw your money away. Now we have a very even piece, and I'm going to cut this bone off and just leave it as a really thick ribeye. So same thing from cutting the roast, in between the bones, nice and straight. There we have our chunky boy. Now from here, I essentially have a 2-bone rib roast. I'm going to cut the bones off, put them aside for a meal themselves, and then just cut boneless steaks out of the rest of this. Same thing we did before, following the bone down. From here, you can choose your size of steak that you want and go for it. I am going to just get 4 average size boneless ribeyes out of it. So since it's an even number, I'm just going to cut straight down the middle first. Then cut each of these in half. From here, you can trim off any extra fat that you want. I'm going to leave it on there. It's my personal preference. When placing your meat on its resting place, try not to stack them because then the meat will turn a funky color. Once you've got everything cut, the last step is to throw them in a baggie, preferably vacuum seal them, label them, date them, throw them in the freezer, and you'll be able to pull these out in a year and they'll still be delicious. Thank you for watching this episode of The Bartender and the Butcher. I hope you learned something. If you did, please like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time. Hasta la vista.
That's funny.
I thought it was funny. I don't know how to explain how to do this. If you gouge a little extra meat, it's okay. This is yours. You gotta practice. It's a little sticky. All ready for all the flavor flav. Where are you going? Oh, gosh. Can you turn these off so I can wash my hands and drink some water?
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, I need an outro. Never mind.
That looks awesome. That looks ridiculously good.